Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Gettin Sketchy Live, the greatest live broadcast in all of YouTube. I'd like to welcome everybody from around the world this evening as we go into episode 10 of season 16. I know it's episode 10 because this is the last drawing episode of the season. That is the only reason why I know it's episode 10, to be completely transparent. But tonight I will be doing the drawing for you. And for those of you who don't know what Getting Sketchy is, real quick, it is a live show where either me or Ashley, we try to create a drawing for you inside of 45 minutes. And of course, it's a pretty sketchy drawing, and we are also sketchy dudes, so Getting Sketchy is where the name comes from. Now, this is a sketch. It's under the gun. There's a timer. Everything's designed to make us sweat for your entertainment pleasure. But we'll try to sprinkle in some education as well and some instruction on using the materials that we're using tonight and drawing and all that good stuff. If you are watching the live version of this on YouTube, there is a chat box, or if you're watching it on the website at thevirtualinstructor.com, there's a chat box. You can post comments and post questions. If you do have a comment or question, we ask that you use the super chat function, which will get your comment or question predominantly displayed in the chat box. It does cost a little bit of money, but it does go to help this channel out, so we'd appreciate it if you do that. And you have to be a subscriber to participate in the chat. So there's a 1 minute wait limit. So if you're not a subscriber already, make sure you subscribe so that you can participate in tonight's chat. But like always, I'm joined by Ashley. How are you doing this evening, Ashley?
Doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking. I hope you folks are doing well also. Wow, 10 episodes. I can't believe the season is almost over. The season has flown by, but this week has really dragged. It feels like so much has happened between last week and the drawing that Matt's going to create for you this week. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with this this delicious subject. And I saw that some of you guys are already talking about candy and your favorite candies, and it's got me thinking a little bit, what's my favorite candy? So I kind of like the classic candies. Candy corn. I think a lot of people don't even like candy corn, but no. I love some candy corn. It only comes around once a year, so maybe we can do a candy corn drawing in a few months.
Well, I have done a candy corn on Gettin Sketchy.
You've done candy corn.
I've done candy corn.
You know, it's getting hard to choose subjects.
Right, it is.
16 seasons and 10 drawings per season.
Well,
all the fun stuff's drawn.
Yeah, 10-ish episodes. The first few seasons of Gettin Sketchy, I only did a few drawings because I was doing it by myself.
Yeah,
and now we do 10 drawings in a season. But candy corn is absolutely disgusting. That's why they only have it once a year, because if it was year round, people would get sick of it.
And it makes me sick.
Yeah.
You know, I eat like a big handful, and then I feel real muddy and sluggish on the inside. So I'll stick to hard candy, like what Matt's going to draw tonight.
Yeah, candy corn is nasty. Anyway, we are doing candy tonight. We are doing a drawing of candy tonight, and I'm going to be using a combination of markers, colored pencils, and a little bit of gouache. And for those of you who don't know what gouache is just simply opaque watercolor. And I'm only going to be using white for some highlights that we'll add at the end. I'm going to be working on marker paper, but you can work on any surface that you want. But marker paper is going to give you the best results if you're following along with me. Now, the photo reference that I'm going to be working from will be up on your screen during tonight's broadcast, but you can go fetch a copy for yourself. All you have to do is click on there's several things you have to do. Click on the little icon of my face down underneath this video. That will take you to the YouTube channel. Subscribe and click the notification bell while you're there if you haven't already. And then look for the post tab. Clicking on the post tab will take you to the post page. And the very top post, if you're watching this live, is the photo reference and a link back to this video so that you won't miss a thing. Now, you are here because you like to draw and paint, I would imagine. And if that applies to you, then you need to go check out what we have over at thevirtualinstructor.com. Thousands of art instruction videos on every medium and subject matter that you can imagine. We have a complete library of courses and classes. There are currently over 112 of those. And some of our class series go, 10, 12, 13 hours long with 12, 13 lessons within them. The courses are extensive. They all include illustrated ebooks. We also do weekly critiques where I critique a submitted piece of artwork from a member every week. There's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers that includes absolutely everything you need to teach. There is so much there to explore, and it is super affordable, especially compared with all that you get for being a member. If you want to learn more about the membership program, you could have scanned that QR code that's on your screen, so you can rewind the video or scrub back in the video, find that QR code, or you can look for the link in the description below. Everyone starts out with a week-long trial for free, and then beyond that, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So essentially, you can try the program out for 37 days and see if it's right for you, which it probably will be. So again, link in the description below. Also, if you want to get on our mailing list and check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so. There's a link in the description below this video as well for you to check that out. That will put you on our newsletter list so I can send you free art lessons and also updates to what we've added as part of the membership program just about every week. I send out an email just about every week. So, all right. That is all said. Do we have any quick comments to take a look at first?
It seems like everybody loves chocolate and dark chocolate.
Well,
Reba does mention and support that the program is the best deal on the internet. So you heard it from Reba, folks. And I will say, with reading over everybody's favorite candies, I'm reading them all, but only when I read the word Skittles did my mouth water. So apparently I have a Pavlov's dog type of reaction to Skittles. I can hear that bell ringing in my ear. So
yeah.
Tasty.
Well, my favorite candy is chocolate. I do like chocolate. We're
you're
not
a
drawing
chocolate
chocolate tonight, but
No.
if you do want to see a demonstration of markers and colored pencils together with a drawing of chocolate, there is a video on this channel where I draw a Snickers bar.
Oh yeah, that's
from
a
start
good
to finish, using the same combination of media that we're going to be using tonight. So, but tonight we are doing a piece of hard candy, and again, I'll have the reference image up, and I think we're ready to get into this. I think we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and switch over and watch me sweat. There is our candy up there in the corner here. And it is a piece of red candy.
And it's not in a square, but it's close to it. It's hard for folks to tell because of the white background.
Yeah, it is a square composition. And I have, blocked off a square composition on my piece of paper here. Mine measures 5 inches by 5 inches. And I do think, before we go into this, I do think it's important to always have a picture plane established. Even if we're doing something that kind of have, like a subject like this that could have endless boundaries. And the reason why I say that is because we can use the edges of our picture plane to make comparisons to the edges of our subject in the photo reference that we're working from. And that helps us to ensure accuracy in our drawing. That's one of the things that we can use to compare.
The size from the edge of the subject to the picture plane is still something that's measurable, even if there's nothing there.
Right, like the corner where the candy starts, where the other side of it ends, and we'll be using that to get the initial drawing in place. And for the initial drawing, I'll be using just a regular old graphite pencil. You can see that I probably need to sharpen this before we draw, so I'll do that. And this is just this. I think it's HB pencil. It may be 2B in there. It's been a while since I've switched it out.
Pretty close.
To sharpen this pencil here, I'm using this fancy sharpener that's specifically designed for this type of pencil. So we go ahead and get that out of the way. And look at that,
Boom,
nice and sharp. Love that. Wish I could do that with all pencils. Anyway, I'll be starting with a graphite pencil. And I'm going to be drawing very lightly with that graphite pencil because I want the colored pencil applications to go over the top. I'm not going to be putting a lot of pressure down there. So the initial drawing might be a little bit light. But as we start adding marker applications and colored pencil applications, you'll start to see it a little bit easier. I'm going to be using my Prismacolor Premier alcohol-based markers to create somewhat of an underpainting. So I'm going to be putting these down first. These will cover, obviously, more surface area in a shorter period of time than if we did the entire drawing with colored pencils. So the marker colored pencil combination is a great combination of media because they can kind of sit on the surface and look like they were applied in the exact same way, especially if we create a marker underpainting. Now, if you want to learn more about this process in depth, combining markers and colored pencils, there's a link in the description below to the course Colored Pencils Plus, which is one of the courses that's available to members. And in that course, we take a look at combining different media with colored pencils. We do markers and colored pencils, watercolor and colored pencils, Posca and colored pencils, and ink and colored pencils. So, if you're interested in using colored pencils in conjunction with another media, that's a course that you probably need to check out. All right, I'm going to be using Prismacolor Premier colored pencils as well. Now, for the most part, I have every Prismacolor pencil known to man in my disposal, but this is my white pencil, which I went looking for right before we went live, and that is all that's left.
I'm surprised you found that little thing.
Yeah, so I mean, compare it with the size of my thumb. That's not going to be real effective tonight. It's time to go to the art store. So I'm going to be using actually a Caran d'Ache Luminance white pencil for my white highlights, and it does look like it's not white. It looks like it's got like black and stuff on it. That's because I used my sanding pad that I also used to sharpen charcoal pencils with, and there's a little bit of charcoal in there, but it won't affect the tip of the pencil and the marks that we make. It still makes a white mark. So if you're freaking out over that, that's what's happening. And I also have a colorless blender along with several colors that I've selected. Now, a colorless blender is basically just a pencil with the colored pencil material without any pigment.
It's just wax.
It's not just wax. There is still, there's still something that's holding it together.
Some kind of binder.
But it's just like a colored pencil without any pigment. So we can use this to do some blending and softening of the application of the colored pencils over the top. And I'm going to be using some gouache. This is my designer's gouache. I'm going to be using white. And feeling the tube, it is like dry at the bottom. So I'm hoping I can get some of this out of here.
You just need a little.
Yeah, I got a little bit at the top.
And your gouache is perfect to mix or to apply over colored pencils because it dries to a matte finish, different than acrylic. So it's not going to shine. It's not going to stand out or sort of separate from the other media that Matt's going to use.
I also have a glass of water to thin the gouache out a little bit so that it's easily spread, and I have a test sheet of paper here. I didn't do
some colors.
I didn't do a test drawing. Sometimes Ashley and I'll do a test drawing before we go live, just to kind of experiment with colors and things, and just to see if we've got enough time to do the drawing. I didn't do an experiment this time, but I did make a few marks with some different colors just to experiment a little bit before we went live.
I see all those colors in there.
Yeah,
Looks like you're ready.
They're there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be using both warm and cool grays in areas, and it's kind of going to be an extreme. I'm using cool gray and also French gray. French gray is a very warm gray. So in the wrapper, there looks like some cooler grays and some warmer grays that are next to each other. So I'm going to be using both of those colors with different intensities. But if you look in the shadow is mostly cool gray. So I'm going to be using mostly cool gray there, but the wrapper has some warmer grays in it. So French gray for that. That was also kind of dictated on me because my 20% warm gray is completely out of pigment.
So you could use warm gray if that's what you have.
Yeah, you can definitely use warm gray.
The French gray out of necessity.
I'm using the French gray out of necessity, but you can see it's not that extreme. But it's actually a little bit closer to what we see in the reference.
Yeah,
anyway.
maybe.
All right.
That's all the materials. Now, you mentioned you're working 5 by 5 inches, and that's marker paper?
This is marker paper. Did I show the marker paper? Here is the marker paper.
Okay,
ooh, sliding in here. Now, I really like Canson marker paper. The only thing about Canson marker paper is that it's very thin.
Yeah.
And you have to, I've always taken a sheet of like Bristol paper and attached it to the Bristol paper and put it underneath the marker paper because the marker paper is a little bit translucent. This paper, however, by Strathmore is completely opaque and it's thick, like Bristol paper. So I'm using that tonight. This pad actually was a gift from our good friend Artsy Crochet, who sends me stuff from
All
time to
right.
time.
Shout out to RC Crochet.
And we're going to be using the paper that she sent to me tonight. All right. I was trying to flip the pad. That was not a drop. All right. Are we ready?
We are ready.
We're
It's
ready.
6:45, 45 minutes on the clock, puts us right inside the hour.
Yeah. If I finish in 45 minutes. All right, let's go. Timer started, 45 minutes. I'm going to start by using the edges of the picture plane to determine where the edges of the piece of candy should be. And this doesn't have to be perfectly exact, but it is a good place to start. So I'm finding the top corner over here, and I could probably drop that down a little bit. I'm just going to make a mark for where I think that should be. This is just a little, this side is just a little over halfway up, it looks like. And the bottom of the wrapper, maybe somewhere right around here.
Giving yourself some targets to aim at.
Yeah, and the other side of the wrapper, much skinnier, about right here. Now our piece of candy is going to exist right in the middle, so I'm going to start by just moving my entire arm to kind of make an elliptical shape here with very light marks. You can see these marks are very light. And then from there, I'm just going to start kind of sketching things out. And again, since this is a piece of candy, any kind of thing that's a little bit of a deviation from the original reference is not going to be that big of an issue.
Right. The actual piece of candy could be more circular or more elliptical, and without the reference to compare it to, and we don't compare artwork to references when they stand on their own, it still look great.
And I already see that I've made this a little bit bigger, but that's fine. If we make the candy a little bit bigger, that's not going to be an issue.
Yeah,
It's
what's wrong with more candy?
That's going to be a little bit of an advantage, actually, to get some of those small little things that happen in there. So maybe we'll just make the body of the candy a little bit larger.
It's a good point, Matt. When you're working with a small subject and has fine details like this does, drawing larger than life helps us get our tools into those fine details. So it's really impressive. You go to art shows and art galleries and you see huge artwork, and it's so big and demands attention, but sometimes it's actually a little bit easier to make than if we worked small. So if you're an artist that often worked small, give it a shot. Go big. Go at least bigger than your sketchbook sometimes. And it's more space to cover and takes a little longer. You use more materials, but you can really work up those details because they're a little bit easier to render when they're larger in scale.
And we'll put that shadow in after we get the basic outer contours of the candy in place. And we'll go in and put some hints of where we see contrast and value and some of the shapes we see on the inside after we get the outer contours done. And I'm going to do a light erasing as well once we get our contour lines in place.
Very good. I'm just going to go over it or tap it out with a kneaded eraser maybe.
Yep. Which is another material we're using tonight. All right, before I get too carried away with some of those details, let's go ahead and drop the shadow in. And I'm going to look at how far over this needs to come. It looks like our light source is coming from the right. That produces this shadow shape, mostly leaning towards the left. It doesn't come quite all the way out to the edge, where it curves back.
Now, if you haven't used colored pencil and marker together, the reason they work so well for something like Gettin Sketchy is with colored pencil, you have to work in layers and build up those layers to mix colors. So you may have 2, 3, or 4 layers of pencil in a given area. So in effect, it makes it feel like the drawing is bigger because you're covering space over and over. It's like covering more space. But you can get a layer of marker down pretty quick just because sometimes you could use the chisel side, the chisel tip, and work over that. And it's like jumping ahead. It's like skipping ahead to the third layer. And the marker doesn't change or take up any of the tooth of the paper. So you could actually put marker down and then still have just as many applications of colored pencil available to you as if the paper was still white.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, colored pencils are actually, when used correctly, they're actually one of the slowest mediums out there. So that doesn't really lend itself very well to what we're doing here, even though we use colored pencils kind of frequently.
Yeah, I've used them without marker before, and it always feels like a real hustle. I'll be on it for 45 minutes, and I usually make the drawing as small as I think I can possibly pull it off.
All right, let's go back in here. If you look real closely at the reference and my drawing, there's going to be some differences, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time getting everything perfect for what we're doing here, because we're still going to be able to create the illusion that we want, even if there's, distortion in the shadow or whatever. And this is a pretty long shadow. I'm kind of making it a little bit shorter because I feel like making it as long as it actually is, or as deep as it is, might lead to the drawing not looking as representational as it could be. So now I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to just make some notes on where things get lighter and where things get darker. So I'm just basically looking at shapes of contrasting color and value and just kind of planning out where those are going to be, and knowing that they may shift and change when I start to actually add them. And some of this will be covered up by the marker applications, but we've got a nice dark red right here in the middle. So I'm just going to kind of give an indication of that shape.
All right, Reba says, does the underpainting need to be alcohol markers, or would watercolor markers work too?
Watercolor markers will probably be okay, but ideally you want alcohol-based markers for this. The watercolor markers, they're going to work too, but sometimes what I found with the watercolor markers is they can get pretty intense.
Right, that's what I was thinking. There's some very light colors in here.
Which some of the light colors might be, it might be better for the watercolor markers if you use, if you touch the tip of the marker with a wet brush and then apply the watercolor marker that way, almost like you're dipping into a pan of watercolor, instead of, putting the marker down and then activating with water. That's usually where the watercolor markers are they're most intense, is when you do that kind of stuff. Trying to get absolutely every little thing in there, because there's a lot of complexity in there. We could spend hours working on each end of this wrapper if we wanted to.
Just got to figure out what's important to communicate that material. And I think it's where the shapes overlap, they get a little bit darker to create that translucent effect. And some of the details maybe don't really contribute to that cellophane feel. Edit those out.
Just trying to work as quickly as I can so I can start putting color down, because I know when we're doing the adjustments at the end, where we're making things lighter and darker by adding the colored pencils, that's going to be the most time consuming part of this whole process. And I don't want to spend too much time, fiddling with different shapes and things here in the cellophane. All right. I think this is good enough.
Looks good. And you got to remember,
erase away
when you make your initial drawing, that there's room for refinement in the subsequent steps in media.
All right, now I'm going to use the kneaded eraser, and I'm just going to dab right over the surface. And you can see when I do that, we can still see our pencil drawing, but we see it faintly now. And this lifts up enough of the graphite so that hopefully in the final result, we don't see a lot of graphite sitting there underneath the marker and colored pencils. And it also kind of protects the graphite from interfering with the colored pencil as well.
Matt, we've got a super chat.
All right.
It's from Shell Bell, and she asks, can you please repeat which zebra pens you like? You've been using zebra pens, a new version, I guess. It's not new, maybe, but
no,
you used it recently in a live class.
Well, the zebra pens are a oil-based ballpoint pen, and that is the brand name. That's all I know, is that they're called they're zebra pens. there apparently are different types of zebra pens, but I don't have one readily
Yeah,
available.
I'm looking for one. There was one in this drawing board's tray for a while.
Yeah, it's over there on my desk by the computer if you want to grab it. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start applying the marker applications. And start with the wrapper over here, and we'll work our way over. And I'm going to start actually with a 20% French gray. And I'm going to just start filling in some of the shapes that I see here with this marker, and try to make it as light as possible here. So the markers can layer just like colored pencils, where we can put down a little bit of the marker and then come back and go back over the top of it and make the color a little bit more intense and a little darker. And I am using the finer tip of this pen to do so.
All right, Lisa and Terry have answered Shellbell's question before I could read off the inscription, the name of this zebra pen. It is, in fact, the Rubber 80, and it's an R8000 model, made in Japan.
Yep, Rubber 80.
Yeah,
that's
the
what it
Rubber
is.
80. I knew it was rubber. I just couldn't remember the number. And it's very fine point. A lot of control in your value by just using subtle pressure changes. So an excellent ballpoint pen for drawing. In fact, I'm shading a little bit with it right now on my scrap paper. Feels great. And Sue asks, are they waterproof?
Well, they should be water resistant at the very least, because they're oil based.
Yeah. I haven't used them like in conjunction with a wash or anything like that. Try that.
But in theory, they really should be. All right, as we get closer to the body of the candy, we're going to get smaller marks here. And again, we don't have to be too perfect with things here. Just want to create an illusion that looks believable and conceivable. Now, these marks are going to look pretty dark when we first make the initial applications, because everything around it is white. All right, now I'm switching to the 20% cool gray, and
now,
we're going to go in and put some cooler grays in here, right over the top of some of these warm grays, and just get a little bit more variety in here.
Evie had a question about marker drawings, and she says, are marker drawings saleable?
Saleable, like can you sell them?
Is there a market for marker drawings?
Well, there's a market for anything that you create. If you make the market and you can convince anyone to buy it, then yeah, there's a market.
Yeah, and they're saleable in that they are pigmented, and they are light fast, and so they're permanent, like other saleable artworks. Now, some media that are common now and weren't always as saleable early on. Watercolor is one of those. Watercolor wasn't really originally thought of as a finished art medium, but it became more and more trusted, and as more artists adopted watercolors, they became a real favorite for galleries to carry and to sell. And I would make the argument that markers are probably are following that same path. For a long time, they were used a lot by illustrators, just like gouache was mostly used by illustrators. But both of those media are being adopted more and more by fine artists. So I would say the more you use them, Edie, and the more we use them, and the more, I don't think the word common is right, but I'll use it. The more common they become in the marketplace, the more saleable and accepted that they would become.
And I would add that I would say most anything that's handmade these days is going to, be a little bit more attractive than things that are digital, because, digital stuff, digital imagery, especially with AI, is becoming ubiquitous. And it's kind of like when photography first started. Everybody wanted a photograph. That was the big deal. And over time, people kind of had a desire to go back to handmade things after first just wanting something a machine made. So kind of same thing happening there.
All right, we've got a super chat from Hadra.
Oh, and we've got to do both.
That's right.
We've got to do both of the cheers there.
We're behind on the cheers. Hadra says, wishing both Ashley and Matt happy Teacher's Day. Thanks for your knowledge and goodness, inspiring work and life ethic, and helping us to, quote, never lose a holy curiosity, as Einstein said, in our eternal journey as students. From a very happy virtual instructor member. What a wonderful and wonderfully expressed comment. Thank you, Hadra.
Thank you, Hadra. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And let me give a cheer for both of our super chats.
Yeah!
All right, so let's go back in with just a little tiny touch of some. Do I have this 50% cool gray? Yes, I brought it over here. Thank goodness. We're going to go in and we're just going to put a few little darker marks here, especially when we get closer to the candy here.
Using a transparent medium on a transparent subject, it just works. The wrapper's already looking good.
Well, thanks. I'm a little concerned about the time.
Plenty of time. Now, last week, I chose a medium that in no way was going to allow me to cover the amount of space that I had in 45 minutes. And so I went over a fair amount last week. It was a pretty long show. So, Matt and I, he mentioned at the top of the show, we're sketchy guys. And you know what that means. It means you can't trust us. Something
that's not, don't tell them we can't trust.
Sketchy means, it's not trustworthy. So we may have fibbed when we said we're going to do drawings in 45 minutes. Sometimes they go a little long.
Most of the time it is a little longer.
Yeah.
When I first started doing Gettin Sketchy many years ago, I did 30 minutes.
Good gracious.
Yeah. Well, everything was pretty much pencil, and it was pretty. We weren't doing like markers and colored pencils.
Yeah, we've really pushed the boundaries of our 45-minute limit imposed on ourselves over the last few years with some of the media and some of the subject selections.
All right, we're not going to use the pop red here. Let's try this Carmine red. Is this Carmine red? Yeah, we're going to try the Carmine red. That's still pretty strong. Let's see. Let's start with magenta. Let's see if magenta's too strong. That's a little too pink.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with Carmine red.
Yeah, Carmine red's usually got a touch of orange.
Actually, this is crimson red. We're going to start with crimson red. And I'm going to start right in this block that is the darkest shape here.
It's safe.
Yeah, because that's strong. Just going to try to replicate the shape that I see here. And then we've got a little bit here at the bottom.
More dark shapes dancing around under there. This image has a nice example of how color bounces, and that creates unity in a composition. So we've got this red candy and it's gray shadow, but right under the candy, we can see some of that red reflecting into the surface that the candy's sitting on. You can see a pinkish gray down there, and that is great and sometimes challenging to pull off, but less so with paint. You can always mingle a little bit of an object's color into the objects or the surfaces just right around it, and it helps to pull those separate shapes or sometimes separate objects, like in a still life, really together. So it keeps the artwork from feeling like sort of stickers or cutout shapes that are just laying next to one another. So we're going to get to see a great example of that, some of that warm color mingling into our gray shadow.
Okay, so
just
I
by
changed my mind. I
proximity.
did use a little bit of that. What color was that? I'm using a little bit of carmine red. This is
Mhm.
the warmer, more orangey red, just to get a little bit more variety, a little bit more contrast between those reds. And I'm going to go ahead and try a little bit of blush. No, I use let's try the blush pink. Yeah, let's go right up here and just put a little bit of this down.
No, I missed it. What color is that?
This is blush pink.
Blush. Yeah.
This is apparently the color you turn when you blush.
You get embarrassed.
I'm not too concerned with the highlights because we're going to go over the top with colored pencils.
Good point. You don't have to think like a watercolorist if you're going to mix these three media together: markers, colored pencils, and gouache. You can put those highlights back in instead of preserve them from the start of the artwork, as with watercolor. That can be challenging sometimes.
And
All right,
a streak of lighter.
Mark in Myrtle
Alright.
Beach says, if I only have the 12 color set Prismacolor markers without any of the grays that you're going to use or have used already, can I use Prismacolor gray colored pencils only for the wrapper? So maybe have some areas that include marker underneath, but not everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can, especially if you're going to use a colorless blender to help sort of smooth out and unify what could be somewhat of a speckly surface where you kind of go light with your color pencils. That'll give a more of a uniform surface if you're going to have marker in other places.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you 100% can do that.
Mhm.
100%. All right, let's see if we want to use poppy red or not. Just so orangey. But you know what? Let's go back to the blush pink for right now. Then we'll start putting some of these little specks of darker red in here.
And Moki says, I wish you guys do cars, God. I mean, like Ferrari, Lexus, etc. They are hard to draw. Yeah, cars are generally challenging to draw because if your proportions are off a little bit, it looks like it's been in an accident. So we don't do a lot of those, but Matt and I both have drawn cars, I think, for Getting Sketchy. And Matt's done some pretty long car drawings or paintings in the live classes over at the virtual instructor, which happens right after 30 minutes after this show. So
Yeah.
Matt's done a really beautiful Porsche drawing in pencil. Didn't you draw a classic Ferrari in colored pencil?
I did that was an MG.
An MG. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I've done several cars, but
so they can take a little longer. We sometimes shy away from them. Or
I've also done a Maserati,
Yeah.
a classic Maserati. I've done several cars. Most of those are part of the program over at the virtual instructor, but there are a couple on YouTube here.
And many seasons ago, I did a classic Volkswagen Bug, in this program, Getting Sketchy, and it's got a lot of rounder parts, and even if you're drawing it from an angle, you can tell if there's a symmetry problem. And I think I spent 35 minutes just drawing the contours and then shaded it in like lightning in the last 10 minutes as fast as I could, because you've got to be super careful with the contours of cars. They're specific, and we're people are good at looking at portraits and telling if there's a problem because we look at people a lot, and we look at cars a lot too. So you can really tell if there's a little bit of a proportion issue with a car that you're familiar with. So you got to really take your time with those subjects. A lot of times here on Getting Sketchy, we do choose subjects that have some flexibility built in, like animal and landscape subjects, an animal could be, slightly different in proportion than the reference, and it still look like the right animal. We're not quite as critical with some of those subjects. I do like to do a lot of drawings of man-made objects, and there's a little danger there because their proportions have to be just right, or they do look damaged.
All right, now I'm going back with the carmine red. Yep. And just kind of warming things up and kind of trying to make everything a little bit more consistent. The red that I have here in the middle is I just don't have a variety of colors, so I'm going to kind of let things be a little bit more of a warmer red in the drawing because of the color limitation.
Yeah, that's a good point. When we work with marker, we don't have the I guess the ability to mix them as delicately as you can with paint in as subtle of a ratio just to nail a color, even if you are layering to make new colors. So sometimes we have to be a little tricky and with the colors that we do layer to get as close as possible. But then the colored pencil application can further help us sort of fine tune the color, or especially the intensity of color after it goes on top. Let's see, we had a question about space. Have you drawn space or Saturn? I have a hard time with Saturn, and I've done nebula paintings. I actually do that as a project with my students where it's their first exposure to oil paint. We work with oil paint over dry black acrylic on canvas to create sort of gaseous space clouds and stars, splatter paint some stars, things like that, just as a way to introduce scumbling, oil painting technique, and then all one word caps adds or of the moon. And Matt, you did a drawing of a man on the moon.
I've done a man on the moon, and I have actually drawn the moon with colored pencils.
Okay.
And that
I thought so.
That colored pencil drawing of the moon was actually fairly recent. I actually took an image with my telescope and then drew from that image. And I did some stuff with the colors to make it more interesting.
I think Saturn would be fun. I've never drawn Saturn seriously. I've drawn like cartoons of the planet Saturn, but I think it would be a great subject for pastel. Maybe start, not too far away in an asteroid belt, and include Saturn in a portion of the rings that kind of go off the edge of the picture plane, so it really fills the space. I can see that. I can see it in my head.
All right, 17 minutes. That's not bad. All right, let's go ahead and put a little bit of cast shadow down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 20% cool gray here. And we're just going to fill the entire shape initially.
But he says, you have a telescope to observe the nocturnal sky, Matt? Well, when he's not observing his neighbors.
Well, yeah, I do have a telescope.
Just kidding. Just a joke.
And that is, it's a clear night. We'll go out there, and my kids and I will take a
It gets
look.
pretty dark out here. You can see the night sky well. I get a little too much light pollution where I live in one specific direction. I don't see as many stars as I would like. All right. Building up our shadow shape to work into and onto.
Now, there's a little bit of reflection in there, and I'm going to take a risk here and put a little bit of that.
Is that the blush?
Yeah.
I thought that was the right choice, using the blush in there.
And then I'm going to very quickly go back over the top of it with the 20% cool gray, and hope I get a little bit of softening there.
There we go. Everybody's Nana says, I usually use pastel matte with colored pencil. If you want to skip the first layer or two of colored pencil with grays of marker, can I use on pastel matte? Can you use the
No,
no?
I would not
Okay,
recommend
too
that.
rough. Too rough.
Yeah, that
probably.
paper is way too rough. It will destroy your markers.
May shred that soft tip.
And they won't apply and layer in the same way as what we're doing here with pastel matte paper. Alcohol-based markers are at their best when the surface is smooth, and pastel matte paper is the opposite of smooth. Pastel matte paper is a very heavy toothed paper, although it doesn't seem like it. It is very much so. All right, just another coat here of the 20% cool gray.
So it just keeps adding up. Even if it was 20% cool gray, you could stack those.
You keep
layers,
adding it. You keep
subtly
adding it.
get
And
darker.
the question is, do I want to go 50% cool gray? Do I want to go all the way down here? Let's try it underneath here. Yeah.
Edie says on screen, it looks like the graphite has disappeared. Yeah, I agree. I don't really notice the graphite, and there's some darker accents around the edges anyway with gray marker. So if some of that is pencil, it just kind of blends right in. You don't notice it.
I don't know how much I want to bring this dark shadow out, actually. Gotta bring it out a little further, don't I?
Lisa says she just wants to say that Matt's astronaut hangs right here in her house. So pleased to see it each day. Was that one of the auctioned pieces?
It was.
That's right. All right, very good. Lisa's got that piece. Speaking of space paintings.
This gray's a little too strong, but you got to go with it now.
All one word caps is looking for the moon lesson and as asking, is it on the virtual instructor website?
I'm not sure if that is on the website or not. It is on YouTube though.
Okay.
All right, let's go back with the 20% cool gray and see if we can't soften this up a little bit. I actually wish I would have just stuck with the 20% cool gray.
Just all the way through.
Yeah, I feel like that shadow is just too strong.
Well, you know, I thought the same thing maybe, but then I squinted at the reference, you know, because we see the shadow and understand that it is not, you know, it's not there. It's just, it's translucent in its own right. But when I squint at the reference, it's pretty strong. It's pretty dark.
It is very dark.
Yeah.
It's just,
it really is. I'm
just,
comparing it to the, it compares with the darker values in the candy. And I think that's it maybe. I mean, you could probably get darker in the bottom half of the candy and make the shadow feel by comparison lighter.
I'm just going to get a little bit more of that pink in here.
All right, Matt's got 2 minutes left. No, I'm just kidding.
Better not have 2 minutes left. All right, I'm going to get a little bit of warm gray into the body of the candy here before we start. And I'm using 20% French gray for this. I'm just going to get a little bit more variety. This will kind of give us the impression that we've got another red in there when we don't. Just gives it a little bit more variety. Kind of see that?
Oh, yeah. Yep, I like that.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's go. Let's just see if we can make some of these things a little bit darker before we switch over to the colored pencil applications. We can get a little more contrast. Because at first, remember how dark these wrappers look?
Yeah, I do.
Now they don't look quite as dark, do they?
Nope. Not in context.
That is a good example of how value is relative. We understand value based on the values that are placed around it. We understand the value that we're seeing based on the values that are placed around it. That's what I'm trying to say.
It looks like Mary Elizabeth has found the moon lesson on YouTube, so it is there.
Yeah, it's there. You know, that video wasn't popular. A lot of people didn't watch it. But I think it's a pretty cool drawing. I mean,
It's been waiting for today.
I bumped up the colors.
Now everyone's going to discover.
And I think I did that drawing on black paper. Maybe that's why. Colored pencils on black paper? What is this?
I love colored pencils on black paper. I really liked using those Prismacolor colored pencil sticks on black paper. I still have mine, and I understand they don't make them anymore. So,
Yeah, the art sticks.
yeah, I love them.
All right, we've got kind of a faint little, we got a faint piece of candy here. Now we're going to start going over the top of it with colored pencil applications, and we're going to, try to make this actually look like a transparent piece of candy. I'm going to start with a crimson red, and we're going to start adding some of the little details and things like the little stripy pieces.
Yeah,
that come
there
across.
are. You can see those little ribs in there. This little makes it look like, I guess, evidence of how it was manufactured, maybe. Buddy says, what are Prismacolor sticks? They were sticks of colored pencil about the size of a new pastel.
Yeah, and they were called art sticks. They weren't. They didn't have like they weren't like Prismacolor. They were Prismacolor art sticks, but they weren't. They're basically like didn't you just say this? They're colored pencil without the
Pretty
pencil.
much, yeah. There's no wood around it or anything like that. They're kind of thin, thin square sticks. And I liked them because it had all those corners, just like with pastel. So when it started to get dull, you just kind of flip it around to another corner. You can make broader strokes with them once they dulled out, or use a blunt edge if you wanted to.
Now, since we've got a marker underpainting in place, we don't have to put colored pencils everywhere. I'm just using these more or less to kind of refine the details or bring out details that the markers just aren't really capable of pulling out, and kind of enhancing areas of contrast and different little ridges and textures that happen in here to try to make this look a little bit more realistic and less like you're looking at a Barbara Walters special of the candy.
Charles says, different topic, Matt, Ashley. Do you ever use woodless pencils? And if not, why not? I used to use woodless pencils a lot, and it was because I was drawing large. I would use them a lot when I was doing pretty large figure drawings on pads of paper that was like 18 by 24. So because they were woodless, they would wear to a really dull tip, and that's the reason that I liked them. They're kind of heavy, which I also like because they're all graphite, but their drawback is when you drop them, they shatter like glass. But otherwise, I do like woodless pencils, and I don't ever use them on Getting Sketchy because the drawings, in my opinion, are too small for the size of the pencil. And they can come the same diameter as a regular pencil, or kind of like the same diameter of a general's layout pencil, but all graphite. But they can come really thick too. The shorter woodless pencil sticks, they're shorter than a normal pencil, and I think they're hexagon or octagon shaped. Probably hexagon, just like a yellow writing pencil would be, but super thick, like as thick as your thumb. And so you can make really broad strokes, but in graphite, so it feels a little like you're drawing with a chunky piece of charcoal, but you get graphite instead. So they're great because they're pencils. We all love pencils, and they're great for big graphite drawings.
So, if this was going to be a finished drawing, I would cover almost all of the marker.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have to put so many layers with the colored pencils because I've already got a marker underpainting. But since this is a quicker sketch, I'm not going to, cover everything with the colored pencils because I just don't have the time to do that. But I'm just throwing that out there so you know.
And the markers, they go down with a pretty hard edge. So you can use them, Matt's use them to soften his edges. So if you're not going to use them everywhere, you can use them for edge quality, especially. Brett Does Art remembers the art sticks being triangular. I don't think mine were triangular. Man, I wonder if another brand made triangular.
Yeah, the ones I
art
had
sticks.
were also square. So.
Yeah.
All right, just kind of cycling through a variety of different reds here. This is now Tuscan red, and it's a very dark red. So I'm going to use it down here to establish the edge of the candy and also make this value a little bit darker. So it looks like it's sitting on the surface. And I just saw the clock is 4 minutes. Nope. Because we still have to apply the highlights.
That's right.
And the gouache applications.
We'll think of that as bonus time. You get 45 minutes of drawing and then some bonus time tonight. Audra says, lovely color temperature transitions. Great lesson in how to render candy or colored glass. Yeah, there's quite a few subject matter that we could kind of apply this technique and method to.
Well, a few seasons ago, I did a colored pencil and marker drawing of like a perfume bottle. Remember that one?
I do.
That was the season we're doing everything in the style of.
Right.
We're doing stuff in the style of different artists. All right, I'm gonna just enhance some of the edges here with a gray. This is 90% warm gray, and we're just gonna kind of define some of the edges of the cellophane just to make things a little bit crisper here and there and not so soft around the edges. More time, I would go in with different grays and really get things dialed in here, but
what Charles says, it looks real. Good enough to eat.
Kind of the candy you get at grandma's house, isn't it?
That's right. That's when I think of hard candies, that's what I think of. But one of my favorite hard candies isn't translucent like this. It's what do they call them? The Werther's Original. They're kind of tan colored.
Yeah.
They don't look as good, but they are tasty. Now, Mary Elizabeth says it looks great the way it is, but I'm anxious to see some of those whites go on.
We need the highlights because it looks like it's wrapped up, but it can look more like it's wrapped up.
I agree. The highlights are going to really help the cellophane look like it's laying over the candy. The cellophane looks really good already beyond the candy where it's twisted. But I think it'll really pull those different parts together. Lisa says Janet Fish.
Yeah, it was Janet Fish.
Favorite lesson where I fell in love with alcohol markers. Yeah, I love those vegetables wrapped up in cellophane that Janet Fish drew with pastel. A lot of them were with pastel, and those artworks are so different seen in person than in print or on a screen. They are so loose and broad and big, and they feel so detailed and tight when you see them, on a smaller scale. Really cool. And of course, she did think it was a painting of stacks of clear plates. It was fantastic. But nice to see her work. If you get a chance, if you haven't, it's nice to see her work in person. Different experience.
All right. Sticking with the warm gray pencil here, I'm just adding some additional contrast. I kind of bumping up the contrast a little bit. So making the darks a little darker.
Yeah, and that's making the shadow underneath feel lighter again.
Yeah, it needs to be lighter. But it's fine. It's working. It doesn't feel like it needs to be quite so lighter now. All right. Now let's add some highlights. So I'm going to start with a white colored pencil here. And we're just going to, and I know my time is probably up, right? Yep, time's up. And we're going to start by just making some areas a little bit lighter. And with more time, we could really make this thing really pop.
Jan says, quote, push the darks, says every art teacher ever. You're right about that. It's 90% of my advice. My advice in the classroom is go darker.
So just adding that little bit right there makes a difference. You know, that's why these little highlights are so important.
Yeah, look at that. Look at the difference, getting that light pink shape in over on the right. So earlier, Buddy had mentioned that she kind of uses a moist or wet, damp towel or rag to clean off the white tip of her colored pencil.
Yeah.
Just some advice there. But you know, your pencil's doing just fine as it is, dirty and all.
Yeah, it's fine. It's not creating,
not making charcoal
muddy marks. No. The tip of the pencil is fine.
Charles says, Matt, crazy question. Could you use the white gouache for those?
You could, but you'll need to thin it out with some water so that it kind of goes on translucently. And, you know, even then there's a little bit of control issues with that. So it's a little bit easier just to use the white gouache for the extreme highlights, which is what we'll get to in just a second. So there's like little specks where light's hitting, you know, those are the areas that we reserve for the gouache, because these little highlighted areas, even though they're stronger highlights, there's still a little bit of the red color showing through. You know, so they're not,
makes them feel pink.
Right. And if we applied, you know, opaque gouache, it would lose that.
Well, Janine is convinced. She says, I believe it's time for me to invest in some markers. Marker work is fun. You know, I got into it a little late because I didn't really do commercial illustration or commercial art or illustration. And my students started bringing in alcohol-based markers and working with them and choosing to work with them when they had media choices. And I started playing with them a little bit and really got to where I liked using the markers too. So
just
get into it.
Just going to squeeze out a little bit of gouache here. And I'm going to grab a fairly thin brush. It's not super thin. And a little bit of water. And just going to activate this. Get a good little opaque amount on the brush. And then we'll go ahead and put some of these really strong highlights in.
And you can't get this white with your colored pencil probably over the marker.
No, you can't.
So the gouache pushes our value range beyond the capability of the two previous media when combined. Now, Jan says, it looks like the reflection of a landscape inside of there, and I see it. I feel like I'm looking at a piece of candy now, sitting on a windowsill, and I can feel the whole landscape around it.
I'm sure y'all will find something in there.
Looks like
It's
a
kind
little
of
girl standing by a tree.
Kind of a little bit of a joke, yeah. And in every live series that we do, it seems like people find pictures or images of things within the drawing.
Hidden in
and
it,
I
hidden in the
never
marks.
can see them, but other people see them somehow.
All right. Buddy asked, would white acrylic ink do a similar job as the gouache?
Yep. As long as the white acrylic ink you're adding is completely opaque.
Mm-hmm. You might have thinking, you might have to, put a stroke down and then put another one over it to get it as white. I was using some gold acrylic ink made by Liquitex today in place of gold watercolor. In my classroom, we're doing illuminated manuscript pages, and it worked really well.
All right, any place else I want to add this? Let's go right over this little.
Blue Sapphire Girl says she used the Jelly Roll white pen, and Matt and I used to break those out sometimes. We'll be using those for a while.
You can use that too. The thing about the jelly pens is I just don't feel like the application is consistent. But people love them, so. But that will work.
Yeah, it looks like Buddy does have, it's the Liquitex ink that she has, the white. So I'll probably do fine. Jan points out the jelly pen is also awesome, or the Posca markers, and they do come in different sizes now. You can get a pretty small Posca marker and do the same kind of thing with it. We've used those for highlights before. Here.
All right. I know the timer stopped a long time ago, but only went over by about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and you needed to. The gouache is what we were building up to. That little bit of gouache made a huge difference in the unity of the wrapper over the candy and beyond the candy.
It's a pretty small drawing, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you guys can see that. If I would have,
shiny it is.
Yeah, it does look shiny, doesn't it? Those the little dark edges I added in the cellophane. I wish I wouldn't have got so dark on the edges, but oh well. There's our piece of candy, and I do feel like I really wish I would have brought that darker color down all the way to the bottom, but it's okay, because at the time when I put it down, I thought, oh, that's way too dark. All right. Well, that's it.
All right. Well, Charles says that sketch is sweet.
Oh, well, thanks, Charles.
But he says, wow, 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 so great. I would go for a final, piece. Just open that thing up. And Frankie adds, great work.
Oh, thank you, guys. Now, with that being said, we'll go ahead and switch over, and then we'll remind you of why it's important to be here for Gettin Sketchy next week. Even though this was the last drawing of the season, you might be wondering, why do I need to be here next week? I'll explain why. So let's go ahead and switch over. All right, guys. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end and following the entire process there. We on Gettin Sketchy, sometimes we pick challenging mediums and combinations of mediums and challenging subjects, and tonight was all of those things. This is a challenging subject. The shape doesn't have to be perfect, so there's a little bit of freedom in there, but there's a lot of value changes, lots of different color temperatures, and lots of highlights and shadows. So when you look at it that way, it is a little bit more complex. And then whenever you incorporate colored pencils in a short time frame, that ups the ante a little bit. So thanks for giving me a little bit extra time to get this finished, because it's not in my mind. There's a lot more work I could do to it, a lot more work. But that's the nature of creating any drawing or painting. You have to kind of think about the amount of time that you have to work on it, and get it to a point where it's finished enough sometimes. But next week will be our critique show. We like to wrap up every season of Gettin Sketchy with a critique show. So we will go through all of the artworks that we've created very briefly. We'll take a look at them, all the artworks we created this season. So it'll be 10 artworks, and we'll give them a quick critique. We'll tell you what we like about it, what we didn't like about it, and you guys are welcome to chime in as well in the chat box for that. And then at the end of the show, we will pick our favorites. I'll pick one of Ashley's as my favorite, and he'll pick one of mine, and then we'll pick our owns as well. And we would love to hear what you guys need to think about, or what you guys think about that as well. So that's why you should be here next week. Even though we're not going to be doing any drawing, we're going to be talking a lot of art stuff that is important for your development as an artist. If you've never experienced a critique before, or never seen a critique, that is where a lot of the learning happens. You know, it's important to do, but when you actually learn the theory behind things, and you break down previous drawings and paintings, then that's where the real content is, where the real learning is. And we do that every week. I do a weekly critique for members at thevirtualinstructor.com. So I think I just published episode 572. So there's 572 of those. But we're going to be doing that for the Gettin Sketchy drawings next week. A very condensed version of it. But Ashley, got anything else?
I would just reiterate what Matt said. I think that next week's lesson is maybe the most important one, and it's really good to look at your artwork after you have some space between the time and when you made it, and then a little bit on down the road, you can play armchair quarterback a little bit. It's a little, for me, it's easier to be objective in analyzing my own artwork after a little bit of time has passed. So sometimes I love an artwork, and then after a couple or a few weeks, I know what I should have done different. So that's the kind of things that we'll be talking about next week. So I hope you're here for that. It's fast. We have 10 artworks in 60 minutes, and it seems like, we'll give each piece about 5 minutes or so, but it's still challenging to finish the critique in the time frame that we give ourselves.
Yeah, so that's a challenge too.
Yeah, Matt and I are both a little long-winded sometimes, so it could be one of the longer shows. So bring a snack, bring some hard candy, and we'll talk about our artworks next week.
So we hope to see you guys next week for episode 11 of season 16. Now, after episode 11, we will take a break for several weeks, and then we will be back with season 17. So I hope you're looking forward to that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign out. But before we do, if you've watched this all the way to the end and you're hearing me speak, I want you to put your favorite candy in the comments below this video, and what medium you would use if you were to draw it.
Ooh,
and that
good.
will tell me who watched all the way to the end. Okay. So again, your favorite candy and what medium you would use, or combination of media that you would use to draw your favorite candy. All right, guys. For some of you, we'll see you in a minute. For the rest of you, we'll see you next time. See you later, everybody.